Now, if you make this mistake with pan pastels, you're absolutely not going to be able to get details on top. Now in the video, I'm going to cover all that. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening, how to prevent or minimize it happening. And I'm also going to compare pan pastels with pastel sticks as an underlayer and show you how they really differ. And you really don't want to miss that part. It's quite surprising. So let's jump right in. Okay, so what's the issue that I'm seeing? Well, what I've got here is some dark grey pastel matte paper, and I've put on there a good amount of pan pastel. Okay, just regular pan pastel. I've used the pan pastel tool to go on there as well and rubbed it in. And put, as I said, put quite a bit on there. Here's a Pitt pastel pencil, just using a red one just so that we can see it more clearly. Okay, and I'll just draw on top of the pan pastel. And as you can see, it's just skipping over the surface, and it feels like almost as if I'm trying to draw on glass. Now, what makes it interesting? Here's a Carbothello pencil. So I've got a red Carbothello pencil, and that one's working a lot better. Okay, so what's actually going on? Well, as you know, probably I like to test things out. And when things like this happen, that's obviously going to be a problem, because I really like pan pastels for doing underlayers, especially on my larger animal drawings. And I've not noticed that much of a problem like this. But this really showed up recently for me. And I wanted to know what was happening, okay? Because if this happens on a drawing, I can't then get perhaps fur details or feather details on top, well, the drawing's ruined. I can't go any further forward. So what's really causing it? Well, I like to do the tests myself from my background working over the years, research and development. And I know that supplies can be very expensive, and wasting sheets of pastel matte or using up sheets of pastel matte paper like this, and this pastel matte I've used for all this testing, can be expensive. So I've done that for you. And what you're seeing on screen now is anthracite pastel matte. Anthracite pastel matte is the roughest, okay? It's the roughest texture of all. So I figured that would give the least amount of these problems. And what I've got here for you to see, let's just look at the orange one at the top to start. Pan pastel underlayer, okay, and then pencils on top. The pan pastel underlayer has not much pan pastel there, more there, so that's kind of average of what I'd be using. A lot of pan pastel as an underlayer there, but rubbed in well, and then as much pan pastel as I could possibly get on that paper, and hardly rubbed in at all. Because what I see people do when they're using pan pastels, very often they just dab into the surface, and all they then do is just dab it on like that, okay? That's all they're doing, rather than really, you know, rubbing it in and getting it into the tooth of the paper. So I wanted to try all those different thicknesses or concentrations of pan pastel, and then I used one pencil. Okay, so I used red pencil, and I started off using just Pitt. So Pitt pencil is the hardest of all the pencils, and you can see I've got a P by the side, so all that top row is Pitt pencils. I've got a D there, that's for Derwent. They really, what I think is the second hardest. Next in line is Carbothello. Stay with me, this is definitely going to be worth knowing. And at the bottom, I've got a soft one that's Gioconda. Okay, so those are the 4 pencils I've used, and I've tried to use, you know, red in each. Just because there's so much variance, I've tried to keep or limit the variance to start with. As you can see, with Pitt, it struggles to actually lay down a mark straight away, even with almost no pan pastel on the surface. And that gets much worse up until this point where it's a high amount of pan pastel, and then I can barely, as you can see, barely get a mark on there. And then when I've got the maximum amount, it's just skipping on the surface. Okay, I can't get it on there no matter how hard I push. Next in line, Derwent. That fared better. It's not quite as hard as the Pitt. The Carbothello, that was much better again. And then, funnily enough, and I can't understand why, the Gioconda, which is a softer pencil, that was almost like the Pitt. But remember, with colour variances, it's quite possible that this soft or generally soft Gioconda pencil range. Perhaps red is a bit harder in it. You know, perhaps it is like Pitt, so that's what's happening there. I then tried it with white, okay? And funnily enough, strangely enough, it didn't seem as bad as the orange. Okay, you could see the effect, but nowhere near as bad, especially with a Pitt pencil, which was really showing up in the orange. So I continued again, and I tried it on blue. And this time, pretty much all the pencils seemed to work. So there seems to be a variance in the makeup or the pigmentation or something between orange especially and blue. And then I tried kind of a greeny yellow pan pastel as well on that pastel matte paper, and you can see that's really struggling as well with those harder pencils in particular. So then I wondered, well, what about the pencil colors? So then I used dark grey pastel matte instead this time, so it's less texture, so that'll make the effect, I thought, worse, okay? Because there's not as much paper texture showing through. And I use lots of Pitt pencils on this side, okay? So it's quite a lot of pigment, pan pastel pigment on there. I've really like pushed a lot of that in there to make the effect as bad as it could be. And I use a wide variety of Pitt pencils, and as you can see, lots and lots, if not really all of them, were struggling to lay down on top of the pan pastel. Over here I've used Carbothello pencils, and you can see more of them are working, but there's still a significant amount that are really just skipping on the surface. So that was showing that the pencils make a difference. So perhaps if the pencils are harder, it's worse, and it could be a difference in the color, even within the brand as we see in. Okay, so the harder pencils are making it worse. But I wondered why I never really experienced much of this. Well, I then tried a very dark brown. So this would be typical of my animal drawings. Okay, most animals that I'm drawing are usually like a browny color as an underlayer. And I found that when I did the brown, then virtually all the pencil brands worked. Okay, so when I'm using brown pan pastels, the pencils were going on top, and I think that's why I haven't noticed much of this at all. And the other reason being, I don't put a lot of pan pastels down. I usually got so little pan pastel down that you can see my pencil drawing underneath it. Okay, so I think the combination of those means that even though I've used pan pastels and loved them for like 8 years, I didn't notice much of this effect. But some of my students are saying, why is my pencil skipping all the time? And this is an effect that I showed in a video with the Canson velvet paper. It feels almost identical, how the pencils are just skipping over the surface no matter how hard you're pushing. Where does this leave us as pastel artists? Well, I'm going to throw another spanner in the works just for a moment before I give you my suggestions. Now, pastel sticks. Okay, so this is a Rembrandt pastel stick, because I like to also do underlayers with pastel sticks. That's Rembrandt. This one's Jackson's. This is a soft one. So let's put both of these down. And in fact, let's put loads of it down. Okay, loads and loads. Couldn't get any more down on there. Okay, and what I'll do, I'll just lightly blend it in with my fingers. Okay, very lightly, so I'm leaving lots of that pastel on the surface. Same there. Let's use what should create the worst effect. I'll clean the tip of it off on a bit of towel. So the Pitt red pencil should be the worst of all. And obviously it's looking dull because it's on green and grey paper, but that went on there easily. Cleaning off again. And it's showing up on there as well. Give it another clean on the tip. On there. On the pan pastel, I can't do it. So what's that showing us? Well, you know me, I tried other colours as well. So what I did was then I used various types of pastel sticks, tried to match the colours up a bit. So I tried an orange with all the pencil brands. I tried a white with all the pencil brands, a blue, as you can see, the pencils are just working on the top, a yellow. So this effect doesn't seem to happen on pastel sticks. What's the workaround? How do we get around it? Okay, it's pretty simple. If I move that up again and show you, you don't want to put too much pastel down, okay? Because all these tests showed that if you put a lot of pan pastel down, the effects get drastically worse. For some reason, it gets worse on these lighter colors. I haven't tried every one of my pan pastel colors. It takes me ages. But the yellows and the orange that I've tried so far, they seem to really show it up bad. But browns seems okay and show it less. Blues, for some reason, show it less. And white. So I can't really understand that. It's got to be a makeup or the pigment in some of these colors. But if you don't put much pan pastel down, you really shouldn't have a problem or much of it, even when you're using the hardest of pencils. Because remember, the harder the pencil, the worse this effect is showing up. So the tips are, when you're using pan pastels, actually, let me show you. When you're using it, some magnets on there, and you're dipping in, okay? Don't get too much pastel. Work it in fully, okay? Get it to go right in the paper, spreading it out. Little circular strokes usually. Don't have lots of pan pastel sitting on the surface if this is going to be your underlayer. Okay, and that's important. If this is the underlayer, don't leave much pan pastel, or don't over apply the pan pastel. If it's going to be a background, we're not going to put any details on top. If it's a blurry background, then you can really go to town and put as much on as you want, because we're not putting detail on top of it. Okay, but if you're finding your pencils are skipping on the surface, then without a doubt it's caused by too much pigment going on there. And if you put a lot less pigment on there and really rub it in, if it's an underlayer, you don't want much on there, you'll find that the marks will work. So I hope that has helped, and it's important to know these things. A similar effect, as I said, is happening on the Canson Velvet. Check out that video, and I hope to see you all on the next videos.